is about a complete installation of Hornby HM7000 sound into Dapol Class 66. The space is very tight to do this. This is the most difficult conversion you'll ever do. Here I've lined up the body with the chassis to see how much room is inside. The chip is going to fit above the bogie there, under the engine silencer. On this example, the chassis had Mazak rot, and hence it's been a little bit shortened. If not, some milling would have been required. Now we're looking at the radiator end. At the radiator end, above the bogie, there will be the speakers. Alternatively, you could put a sugar cube in one of the cabs, but the speakers I use are more powerful than sugar cubes. This is the first step of the conversion. All the interior is stripped out. Here, the cab interior has had lead sheet glued to the back and underneath the driver. This is because we need a lot more weight in this model. We need to put lead in both cabs. Here, a brass tube has been glued to the inside of the roof. This tube will be used to carry a fibre optic cable that will be fed from a lamp, a tiny micro LED, roughly where the number 66111 is. This is the speaker from an iPad 2nd generation. It's had most of its housing cut away and is just leaving two speakers which will be rewired in series. They're both 4 ohm speakers. They're rewired in series to make 8 ohm, and they are going to fit above the radiator end bogie as shown. They're going to be fixed to the inside of the roof, and this photo is just to show where they will be. Here, a brass tube similar to the other end is been fitted in order to have a fibre optic cable running through it to the front upper headlight. The speakers will be bonded into position using car body filler, and this will provide a large sound chamber between the roof and the speakers, which will be about 3.5 millimeters deep and about 30 millimeters long. What we see here is the speaker now in place. There is an air gap behind that filler under the speaker. The brass tube is completely enveloped in the filler as well and goes through the air gap. Here we've got the cab end with the driver in. The driver's been heightened, he's like higher up, and that's so that we can get a sliver of lead underneath his feet. Fibre optic cables from a kid's toy or a Christmas toy have been put through the brass tube there, 3 of them through each tube. And we can see the 2 speaker wires also poking out of the filler. The lead blocks that are in must not be lower or stick out across the headlight holes, which are those 4 tiny little holes you could see on the inside. You notice another little mod I do. Dapol like to put a lamp iron here that is actually bigger than a lamp. It looks absurd. What I do, I just get my... I've done it on this one already. I've made that look more like a lamp iron by simply getting my snippers and just snipping off as much as I can with these things, and you end up with about a 1.5 millimeters left of the lamp iron, which is actually looks a lot better. Okay, so soldering onto the HM7000 chip. The only problem here is the track pickup tabs, which are right next to the Next18 pins, and what you don't want to do is smear solder all over those pins. So I'm going to do that first to get it out of the way. Coming around here. I've got a little bit of flux on the end to try to get that to take straight onto the tab. It's a good one. So I'll bring in a little screwdriver which has got a bit of flux on the end. Put the flux, which is going to be out of focus because we're focused on the chip. The flux is now on the end of the wire. That amount of flux is so tiny. And of course, when we finished, we need to clean that flux off with meths. If you don't do that with these tiny wires, you are risking that corrosion will break the wire quite fast. Don't put too much solder on the soldering iron, because then it has a tendency to smear and jump onto other stuff. So I've hardly got a dab on the end of that soldering iron. There's hardly anything there. Hold that on. Didn't work. Try again. That's it. So they are the worst two solders to do on the HM7000. The ones right next to all the Next18 pins. After that we'll use all of the others. So just running through those. We've got motor minus, motor plus. We've got front light, rear light. We've got speaker. We're going to use those. We've got the stay alive capacitor. We're going to use those. And we're going to use some AUX lighting inputs as well. All of them. Always light your model up like a Christmas tree. You'll never regret it. So use all of the lighting functions, which are actually on the other side. Yeah, I forgot to say that the reason I'm using this Next18 chip is just because that's what I had lying around, but I can't fit the adapter plug in order to just use a big adapter that would stick onto that Next18 plug, because that makes it just too deep to fit in the N gauge model. And likewise, these two plugs here are going to have to come off, so I'm just going to snip them right off. Use the soldering tabs on the other side. They're garbage. Bye. I'll just tidy that up a bit. Oh, no need. That one's fine. Okay, what I'm going to do now is prepare some LEDs. These are called LEDs on 0.1mm copper enameled wire. So you go online and you search for 0.1mm LED and you'll normally get the thing come up. There's my loco chassis there. Half of these wires have got to go to the cab near that chip, which is going to sit there. The other half of the wires have got to be longer because obviously they've got to go to the other end. I'm going to take the pickup, the positive pickup, off this track pickup here. So they've got to have a fairly short run. I think we'll give them about 2 inches on the positive wire. You always want to add a little bit more than you think, and then we'll make the other one long enough that because it will be stuck inside the loco body, which is going to be detachable but with wires still attached. So the speaker wires are going to be long enough that you can lift off the body and then not so long that when you put the body on you have a mass of wire to get rid of. You want to have hardly any inside there. So that's the main reason for using these 0.1mm wire LEDs. Now, in theory, according to the internet and the paperwork, you just use a lighter to remove the enamel, you burn it off. I've never managed to get that to work, nor with a soldering iron either. So here we have one of them, and I'll prepare this using a file. Get a small Craftwork file. They normally come with one end sticking out longer than the other. That's the positive. So in this case I know that this one here is the positive. I don't want that positive to be very long, although it's got to have a resistor on it as well. So let's say we'll cut it to 2.5 inches. And this light is actually going to go just above the chip in the roof of the loco. This is going to power the upper headlight. And I've made a small mess up already, so that's a good demonstration of why not to cut the wires too short. What this means is that I can never lift the body further than that from the loco. Okay, that's just about alright actually. Yeah. Now what I do is I do two things to look after these LEDs. One is I grab it and twist up the end, because you don't ever want a situation where the two wires get yanked apart and they tear off the little tiny board. As you can see, just for a moment I've managed to get that to focus. It's a tiny little board itself. I mean, we are talking like smaller than a pinhead. One advantage of these LEDs is you can drill a tiny hole for the wires and then get the entire LED through the hole. So yeah, there you go, they're so small. Okay, so now we're going to prep the ends of the wires. What you do, you take them, put them on your fat finger, and you just got to file one side, go away from you, like that. I'm afraid there's nothing more efficient than doing this. So do one side, we turn it over, we've got to do about, really make it into 3 sides. That's 2, and then we'll do one more. Okay, get the other wire. We're filing off the enamel. If we didn't do that, we could test it by, or if we don't do this enough, we'll find out when we test it on a battery. Now get a battery, get a little cell battery like that. That's a CR2032, 3-volt battery. Positive, hold down there. Negative, hold down the back. Yay! And in fact, these this will probably light better than that when it's actually got the supply from the rail. Now the supply from the rail ends up being about 14 volts equivalent, something like that. So we have to use a resistor to avoid blowing the LED as usual. You can put that resistor on either the positive or negative legs. Now the positive wire coming out of a decoder is blue, so what I do, I also colour these blue with a felt tip marker. I'll take the blue, the positive wire here, I call it the blue, and I just paint it with the felt pen. And under your head torch you can just about see that. Now you might not think that's very useful. Believe you me, when you're trying to figure out when you've got a lighting fault, yeah, it's come out blue pretty well. When you've got a lighting fault and you're trying to trace the wires, that blue trace on that wire is so useful. So never skip that step. Alright, so there's one prepared. This guy is going to go in the roof of the loco, coming off this decoder and this track pickup here. He's also going to need a resistor, which is probably going to be in this area of the loco here, just next to the chip. And that's how you prepare the 0.1mm wire LEDs. Demonstration of the fibre optic cables. Remember, I've poked it through the brass tube and it goes there into the silencer. Focus. Okay, so now I'll get my LED. It's just a little test. My LED on the button battery. I should see them illuminate here. There you go. There you go. So the fibre optics from the kids' toys are really useful. And when I get that lined up properly with a bit of adjustment in it, we'll get a nice steady light out of those. This is the loco, and we're wiring the lights. Now what we're going to have is these are the right way round. So silencer is number 1 end on a class 66. This end. Radiator is number 2 end on a class 66. Unusual. Nevertheless, the chip is going here, the speaker is going here. The speaker is already in the roof. There it is. The light tubes are now in partially. The rear light tubes are in. So this is what's going to happen. I'll leave that there because we need to remember that. When the headlight at this end is on, I want a bulb which can be white on this end to do the rear. So that's a small bulb with a long wire because it's got to go from the chip to there. So small bulb on a long wire. This one, yeah, that's a bulb. It's less than 1 millimeter square. That's a lovely bright bulb, and I've already tested that's bright enough. That's going up there. It's going to illuminate that red light tube there, which is a Dapol light tube. It's a pretty coloured red. Actually, it seems to be just paint, but it works fine. The other, when that light is on, red on that end, we want white on this end. So we've got 2 light tubes here. This is the light tube up in the roof for the number 1 end upper headlamp. So we need a bulb to go to that. That will be the shortest one in my little collection I've made here. Here it is. Right, so we'll want that one illuminated as well. a slightly bigger LED. This one's a massive 1.5 millimeters square. That one's going to the front main headlamp, which will be on a tube. In fact, it might just be right on the inside of the headlamp hole, actually. Here, haven't decided yet. Because the reason is I'm going to have another lamp, the side light, illuminated with a little U-shaped fibre optic cable. So this little bulb here, this big bulb, is going to do the headlamp and the side light at the bottom level on the front end, which is the side light being this tiny one here. Right, so this bundle here of wires is going to get connected together on the positive side. So what I do, as you will recall, I have already coloured the positive lead blue with a felt pen, and you can just about see that. Negative, here's the blue. What I'm going to do is connect those three blues together. So I call this job making harnesses. These are wiring harnesses. So we'll get this and make it into a harness. So the positive is pretty simple. It's going to come off the track feed and through one resistor. The reason is we want to minimize the number of resistors in the loco. We have no room for resistors. Oh, if only the chip manufacturers would get rid of the need for resistors. Why do they still make these chips suitable for incandescent light bulbs? I have no clue. Like you read an ESU lock sound manual, it says, get some 16-volt incandescent light bulbs. Oh yeah, they're easy to find. ESU are the worst of the bunch. They have the blue positive wire on an ESU chip is really high voltage. It's like, it is 16 volt. Well, it's something between 14 and 16 volt. The Hornbys are 12 volt. That's good. I like 12 volt. The whole world likes 12 volt. We like 12 volt because we can just use a resistor like a 1K resistor. No problem. You put a 1K resistor on an ESU chip with the blue wire feeding off the chip, and you will blow up your LEDs, all of them, and waste time and money. Yeah, so watch out for that with the ESU chips. Oh, everybody thinks ESU chips are wonderful, but they have some very bad faults. They always have had. There are three faults with the ESU chips. One, the stupid voltage that comes off the blue wire that destroys all your LEDs. Two, they are very prone to cutting out. They have very poor onboard stay alive. When they do cut out, they do an absurd engine startup sequence. Believe you me, when you've heard that 8 times in a row, you won't want to hear it again. Hornbys are better. Even TTS stayed alive for that just tiny fraction that it needed to, a bit longer than an ESU. The third fault with ESUs is the volume. It is too low. Why do Hornby TTS and HM7000 win my book? Because they are the loudest of the chips. They are louder than ESU, they're louder than Tsunamis, they are louder than every other decoder. Okay. So that's one blue side harness made. Now, on the negative side, things are a little bit more interesting. I'm going to join together on the negative side the two front headlights. And they are going to go directly to the chip connection without any need for another resistor. They're going to have a 1K resistor on the blue feed, so everything gets 1K resistance shared. But the red light on the back of the engine is going to get an extra 10K in line before he attaches to these two, and the reason is he will then have 11k of resistance. What that means is that when I'm going along and I attach this engine to a train of wagons and I want the red light to go off, I will just pop into my HM7000 CV settings, turn down the brightness, and immediately the red light will go off. The white lights at the front will stay on, you won't even see any difference. And by doing that, which one real advantage of the HM7000, you've got like live programming while it's running around. So you can just, instead of pressing a button, you just adjust the brightness CV and make those rear lights go off. But they must have had an extra bit of resistance put on them. Okay, so that's harness 1, ready to make the main solders. I'm putting on here the flux. I think it's just plumber's flux from DIY store. You must remove this with meths, or sometimes some countries know it as white alcohol afterwards. In England, we know it as methylated spirits, and it's purple in colour. In other countries it's clear in colour, but it smells the same. It's the smell of model railways. It reminds you of Dad, Grandad, you know. It's the smell of model railways. I'm just rushing to get these harnesses done because I hate the idea of them falling apart and I'll lose my way, so get them done. That's all there is to that one. So these are the resistors I use. 1/8 of a watt is small, really small. Smaller than the ones you get delivered with the LEDs. That's an A20 ohm resistance, which is close enough to 1k. So that's okay for HM7000 chips. The cab light is going to have its separate ohm resistor, because otherwise when you put the cab light on, if that was also going through this bunch, which is basically reversible headlights, tail lights, then when you put the cab light on, you find that they would flicker or even go dim. So we need to have two 820s side by side. The headlighting is going to go through one of them, and the cab light blue is going to go through the other. So that is just going to sit in there on the chassis, just under the chip. Might bend down a little bit, but that'll be alright. There's room for this giant prop shaft receptacle, UJ, universal joint arrangement, to move around. Now doing the other resistor, which is an 820 ohm for the main lighting harness. There, it's going to solder, and it's going to sit there. It's going to solder onto that. Okay, so just about to solder on the lighting circuits. It's on the wrong side a bit. Let's have a go anyway. Oh, good. Good. Should be able to get on. Yeah, that's great. There's a bit of burnt flux that's got to be cleaned with the meths just afterwards. So there you go, I've got one jumper going around from front on the other side to AUX1. So now I'll be able to activate the front lights with AUX1. The front light would then stay on. I'll then start to reverse into the siding with the front lights on. I've got this sheet here that's got what I did, I printed it out, so it's got all the functions from the manual there for the different Next18 connections. There's your typical Next18 connector that you would plug in if you were wanting to put an adapter on. That's your typical adapter. That is made by Trainomatic. Trainomatic Next18 female connector. Very widely available. When you plug that onto that socket and the decoder is that way round, AUX1 will be the one on as indicated on the left hand side upper there. Because it doesn't matter which way around you put that Trainomatic connector board, you'll still have AUX1 always in the same place, top left there, as long as the decoder is this orientation. HM7000 chips cut out really easily, more than TTS chips did. In fact, one of the best things about the TTS chip, which is understated, mainly because people possibly don't even realise, was that they kept the sound alive really well, better than an ESU lock sound as well. A TTS chip could get over some dodgy point work and it would not reset the engine sound, you know, with a start up and all this stuff. It would mostly just carry on really well. The HM7000 is a bit like an ESU lock sound, cut out very easily, and that's a big problem with the HM7000 because when you're on Bluetooth mode there's about a 20-second delay before you can restart. I've discovered that all you need, and you get this with the American chips, if you buy an American sound chip you get a little capacitor with it, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. I thought, well, let's try that with this HM7000, so I'm just going to use these two tabs on the HM7000 chip, which are for the Stay Alive C plus and C minus. There they are, there and there. I'm going to solder onto those in a minute with some 0.1mm wire, which once again I've just prepared the ends with my file, and I'm just going to use with that one very small tantalum capacitor, which is only 200 microfarads, so it's absolutely pathetic, but it's literally got to keep the thing alive for a fraction of a second as it goes over point work and so forth, and this is adequate. That was good how it was. Oh, that's how it should be. That was good. Made a bit of a mess up there. These silver sections could actually touch each other. That's not ideal. Tiny dab of Bostik. Again, it's giant Bostik. Everything's giant. Just put a bit of that on these wires. Any bare wires you need to seal. A bit of Bostik and you'll find that that will insulate very well. A bit ugly. But everything is worth it to avoid a short circuit which could destroy some of the functionality of the chip. Okay, here's finding number 2, comparing HM7000s to TTS chips, there is actually, I think, a bit of protection, circuit protection in an HM7000, which there wasn't in a TTS. So with a TTS it was quite possible to blow up the entire chip by going through the lighting circuit, or blow up an entire chip by going through the motor circuit with track power. With the HM7000 they seem to survive the odd accident, but still be ultra careful. So TTS chips, I mean, in N-Gage they were getting destroyed by me. 1 out of 5 there was an accident. With HM7000 you wouldn't want that because they're twice the price. Okay, we're now on to wiring the chassis. So got a good trick here. We've got some old IDE computer cable from the old printer cable, and this is a great store for finding very small diameter wire. The only downside is this wire is one strand once you take one off, and what that means is you can't use it anywhere where it's going to get bent on a regular basis, like, you know, in the attaching to the bogies or stuff like that. But you can use it for static wiring. It's really useful. So we just take off a like that. And this is going to be great for this because it has to go sit in this groove here. We'll use the original groove, which was for wiring, and we just got to connect this bogie tower connection here to this one here, but on this one we're also going to solder the chip power feed. And this printer cable is really good for this. There you go, you get a permanent bend and it goes along there and it will stay there. One of the reasons I'm changing this wire is because the original Dapol wire had a really bad coating on it, which on many of these old models you'll find is disintegrated. That means that you will accidentally be having a live chassis block, which you don't want. We'll try and go that way up. If we have a disaster, we could probably turn it the other way up without too much trouble. I mean, the shape of the body, this is the start of the roof line on the engine. So above that point, you're really short of space. The decoder end, which is going to be the number one end, which is going to be under the silencer, is here. The roof is sloping up, so that slope there goes there in the main part of the body, but at the silencer that is taken up to some extent by this flat bit that the silencer is glued to. We don't destroy that. Your silencer will either have a hole or just fall out. So we should get the chip in there. Yeah, that's quite good like that actually. And it's going to sit there. It's a good one. Greetings, and what we are going to be doing today is the final solder. So all of the chip is now soldered to the chassis. That means I've got the motor connections, the white wires, I've got the track connections, the black wires. and I'm now ready to attach the body with this by soldering the speaker wires, which are these two tabs here. Meanwhile, we have a little sound from the 00 layout up here. This is my 00 layout. It's a compact shunting layout. Back to the business. These are the wires that were inside the casing of the Apple speaker. I've unpeeled them and cut the end connector off, and now trimmed them down to size. They are just long enough that the body can be put down here for maintenance or building in this case, and the speaker wires will just reach their tabs without the wires being too stretched. Okay, so now I'm at the stage where I can put in the lights. So the cab light is going to go in there, and I've started to untangle the mess. No problem. Glue the LED's wire to the black part there, and there's the LED just right next to the fibre optics, and that will illuminate them. Hopefully everything will stay in position when I put the body on. I think I'll just add a little bit more glue in there. But again, I won't let it touch the LED itself, and definitely not the fibre optics. They are destroyed by glue. Put it in there. That's it. So get my little tiny screwdriver out, clean all old glue off it. Here we are, got a nice blob of fresh glue there. I think we'll put it on the inside of the silencer there, over about 6mm of length. That's it. So one other little problem I had was light leakage out of the silencer. So what we will do to combat the light leakage is use some black silicone sealant. We don't want to get that on the... Go on you go. Don't want to get that on the fibre optics either, because they don't like any solvents. Okay, the last LEDs I have to glue are the headlights, the main headlights. So that is on this side of the 66. And what I'm going to do is make this LED face away from the red thing behind it, because in a minute I'm probably going to have to put a bit of paper or tin foil between the two to stop this LED from actually illuminating the red stick. Right, so I've used, as you can see, this bulb is actually not facing the hole, it's facing sideways. That's fine, that's what I want. There's a second reason for that, which is that we're going to put a fibre optic off it leading around to the other side. The fibre optic will be much less bright because it's going to be a single strand in a piece of brass tube. There you go, I just bend that brass tube in a U shape, and that's going to go on there pretty perfectly. While I was having my Sunday sleep earlier, I got very worried that I hadn't gone to enough effort with these little side lights. This is a sewing pin. Looks like a flipping 2 foot thick sword. Anyway, like that. Do I actually want to have a go at drilling that out? Should be laying up there. See, how do you reckon I'll ever get a hole in that big? Let's have a go. These are called PCB drills. PCB. And they are just brilliant for drilling plastics. So look at how thin some of them are. Like, improbably thin. What you do, you just put them on the plastic. You don't put them in a drill. You just hold them like that and spin them. And they're just pretty much straight through the plastic. So PCB drills, about £6 a set. Get them for your local models for making headlight holes. We are trying to drill a hole that is only the diameter of that fibre optic cable. So that's about not even that diameter. It's pink on the PCB scale, whatever that is. That's it. Turn it. Here we go. I'm in. It's so fine. Just turning the PCB drill. Oh yeah, nearly through. Don't apply effort. Just turn it, don't press it, you'll snap the drill. It is so fine, it's through. And what you tend to have to do is now push it all the way through. You see that little bit of swath come out? This is a massive day in the world of N-Gage. Somebody has finally done an N-Gage Class 66 sidelight hole. Good grief. That's big enough to get a fibre through it as it is. I don't think it is. So what we're going to do, we're going to go up one size on the drills, find the hole. A minute. Obviously, once you've done a pilot hole, the next hole's easy. Except what could happen is it could all burst out the side of the unit. So don't once again apply pressure. Just very slowly turn that PCB drill, and there he is, he's through, and a tiny bit of swath come out. Push the PCB all the way through, right, until it gets to its end, then turn it and it kind of finishes the hole. Otherwise you've got a spiral hole. So you have to go to the end. You feel a sort of, that's it. This is going to make me not love my other 66s as much. Here we go. I'm sure that hole's big enough. Yes. Oh. It's in. Oh yeah, it's sliding in lovely. Now that will just go around the tube, come out the other end and meet the LED. You will now see the fibre optic emerge near that small yellow LED, or small warm white LED. I've got round the pesky corner. Oops, I'll steady this, it's not glued down very well, but that doesn't matter because there he is. There you go, see it? Touching the LED there, that's how you want it, just about like that. I think I fitted the speaker too far that way. It's going to clash with the chassis here by a few millimeters. I've got to go way back towards that black screw a lot more. I'm going to get the Dremel out. Look at this Mazak, this rotten Mazak flying off in chunks. Okay, I've now thoroughly wrapped the chip in Kapton tape, which is extremely important. There must be no way that stray wires or metal can touch any part of the chip. Without doubt, the most likely source of issues in N-gauge, where everything is getting pressed together really hard. That part exposed there doesn't matter, it's not got anything bare on it, it's just the aerial for the Bluetooth. And yeah, incidentally, I was actually thinking of chopping some of that off, because when you trace the wire within that last 7 or 8 millimeters, it's just a flat wire in a squiggle, so I could easily solder a wire onto the last pad of it and then put that somewhere else, and thus make the chip 7 millimeters shorter. But I don't really need to do that for this model. I'm going to get that on there. Look how this little power feed here is desperately trying to electrocute the chip. Kapton tape is also very thin, which makes me love it even more. Don't try not to touch it as much as possible. That'll do. When that body goes down, this should all go together quite nicely. Okay, going for the final install now. Managed to tuck in resistors down the side of the motor here. Still worried about this capacitor, probably the thing that sticks up the most, but hardly any at all, so maybe that's alright now. I mean, the old circuit board must have been in the position where that's going to be. All lights are working, I've tested it. So now I'm going to go into that process again of lowering the body down. I've made sure that there's plenty of slack in these wires, because they might be straight there, but they need to actually be right up against the speaker like that. That's probably a good end to fit first actually, so we'll do a kind of wheelie. Any stray wires, just get them in. There's one poking out there. Get one in. I'll turn it around to the other side. Not looking too bad. Gripped the rotten Mazak chassis. I've got a big space I could have used under there. See in there. Look at that, it's actually huge up there. Oh, and that's interesting. Look, the chip is too far forward. It's got to go back a little bit. Does that mean that the capacitor is now pushed up over the edge of this piece of chassis? No, I don't think it is actually. So that's okay, we'll just push that back in there. There you go. Looks as if it was factory made. We do not want to get the body off ever again. Every time you take it off, you're risking everything. You're probably going to lose some lights. Make sure the bogies are still loose. Yes, they are. Because if they're jammed up, it means you've got a prop shaft issue. Even bringing it down. It's really the middle part that is the problem. Don't bother pressing too hard, it won't achieve anything. Well, the good news is the chip end is looking really good. It's just closing. See, there's a little tiny view of the white metal in there that shouldn't be visible. This is the, I've turned it round, this is the chip end. There's the chip up there. So your HM7000 does go in N-gauge. There you go, there's the evidence. Everything's gone well. I'm now going to paint these little brass areas above the middle wheel because they stand out when it's driving around. I could have used, and my favourite thing for this sort of thing is this little dabber. It's like a pinhead. But I'll use this brush today. It's just about light leakage, so there was a tiny little bit of light leakage around the silencer. So what I have done here is put a torch under the body, and you can see the two spots where the light leakage was. So all I will need to do, take a couple of dabs of silicone sealant on the end of a tiny screwdriver and just touch it on those two dots there. After a 3 or 4 minute wait there on the bridge while it decided whether to go. Nice recovery there. Okay, so we'll just change direction. I'm very pleased with my lights. Look at that little tiny one on the outside, that's the hard one to do. There's a bit of glow going into the cab, but I'm living with that, I quite like it. So the other thing we've got is a cab light on the AUX button, and that's the cab light. Yeah, so turn them on, and I'll just turn the loco forwards and backwards, different directions, so they're the red ones come on. Bright enough for me, don't really want them laser beaming the wagons. Okay, change direction, and obviously that's automatic, but what I can do, because I wired the front light to AUX2, if I turn that off, I can press AUX2 there they are, and now what will happen is that these will stay on in that direction, and also stay on in that direction. And that's handy for reversing into sidings. Okay, so I discovered that the Class 66 TXS profile actually has a few faults, and the Class 67 one is better. This is the Class 67. This profile is actually a lot better. It's got much better horns. Got a very impressive buffering up. And it's also got great brakes, so I'm just going to give this a little run right now. Here's a word of warning. If I go in locomotive settings, browse profiles, you'll see that down here there are TXS profiles. Down here there are TTS profiles. You might think you can install those. You can't. Don't try it. Horrible things happen. So when I tried to install the TTS 66, it actually has crashed the app and deleted all of my icons, all my pictures of all my locos. Let's look at this thing again.